Leo.
Leo Ryan, he didn't seem to want to do much this year when we announced it. But if it's something special
Yeah.
for teens,
For
like
real
how
people.
to talk about, real people, real preteens. He might have been thinking about, oh my God, more time like 5-year-olds. Not so fun. Okay. We have a teeny tiny group tonight.
Oh, we had 60 people this morning.
I know. I'm surprised anybody showed up. How are you, Steve? I'm tired. We were here all day, 9 to 4.
Okay, well, you have the right to be tired. I just showed up.
Yeah. No, you work hard. You're on right now, right?
What's that?
You're more on these days.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Many talks. Many presentations.
Yes, this week was a full presentation.
Well, we're back.
Some
And apart from a few people that my wife is distracting,
she's completely ignoring.
I noticed.
She's the last one to
Yeah.
pay attention to you, Bill.
Yes, I know. After all these decades, I've kind of find it endearing.
Yeah. It's not a problem.
Being
Just
ignored.
celebrating the Bill, right? We're the most ignoring.
Doing the best job. So now we have time for some questions. We have time for answers. We'll find out if there are answers to the questions. That's what we'll use our time for. So, what are your questions? Did you try out the various practices, the following the breath, the alternating the breath, and placing the attention on the experience of thought? Did you try it out? Okay. Do you have any questions about that?
Right behind you.
Yes, Margaret.
So I noticed that a couple of things happened. First, when I look at a thought, it disappears. It doesn't stay. But if I look at something more like my awareness of that clock ticking, or of the burning in my mid-back, right? That doesn't disappear. That doesn't disappear. And I wondered why is that different?
Why is it different? It's an interesting question. But I think different domains of experience behave in different ways. Things in the tactile realm or the visual realm of experience we tend to look at those, they're part of how we look at and construct a reality where we say, the clock's still there, the clock's still there, the clock's... It's very convenient for, you get up in the morning, the alarm clock goes off and you say, oh, that's the alarm clock. So we tend to think it's still there. We could look and find out that the little novella that we're writing about clocks in general and my clock in particular, that we're still writing that little piece of fiction. And that continues to unfold. And if we really look at the story, the whole set of experiences would change. So the itness may disappear. experience won't cease, but the itness of it might. The thingness of it might. But it's kind of, it's actually a product of being kind of in a little bit of a hurry to say, oh, well, it's still there. We actually have to, if we're going to look at all the various domains of physical experience, we have to be willing to look very carefully, to settle and really to start to tease apart things so that it really becomes more subtle, a more subtle relationship with those experiences. This is not to say, oh, well, if I just really stopped my bad thinking about the clock, it would just go, just, nothing's there. It's not like that. But the stability of our stories about sensory impressions, very strong. Sensory impressions tend to resonate for a long time. But that's part of what makes it challenging to really look into interdependence, is that it seems stable. It seems stable. I used to sit in the North Cloister. I often, either by chance or by choice, I liked cabin number 6 in the North Cloister, and I would sit on the porch there, and I would look at the oak tree, and I would look at the bark, and I would contemplate how the bark of this big tree that's probably well over 100 years old, so variegated, and I would say, there it is. But then I would really contemplate it, and you could tell that this pattern of bark had emerged, was still emerging, but just not at a rate that, say, matched my concern about when lunch might come. Not much was going to change between breakfast and lunch. My hunger would go like this, and all of these kinds of things would go like that, but I'd say, oh, it's still there. But the fact is, it's moving all the time. So the itness of it is more in my own mind. So that's the best I can come up with a story of how or why, but it's more a matter of how that happens.
So the goal isn't to not hear the sound, but maybe just hear the sound like arising and falling and coming in and coming out.
Yeah.
But not that you're going to just be able to block the sound and be completely unaware of it. Is that?
No
okay.
Blocking.
Okay.
No blocking. We can engage in calm abiding practices where we settle the mind in such a way that we become one-pointed. It's not a matter of blocking other things, but allowing the attention to settle in to the experience. Other domains of experience can actually just sort of turn off for the time being. That can happen. But it's not, the objective is not to, I hope I can shut off my vision. That's not like an objective. It's something that can happen. And when we daydream, it's very clear. It's kind of like, we daydream and our near and dear ones are talking to us. Nothing is really happening with that. And then we have to, with some shame, admit that we weren't really listening. But we were one-pointedly involved in the daydream.
So one way I'm thinking about this more lately or experiencing it is there's always an object, whether it's, your back pain, the clock, a thought, some emotion. There's always an object, but there's also always awareness. And it comes down to, in a certain way, which of those are you paying attention to? We can get very tangled in the object. My back pain is like this, big stories. It'll get worse and worse. Oh my God, if I don't move, I'll be paralyzed. I don't know what the thought pattern, but you know what I mean. It can just get carried away. Or if that clock keeps ticking, it's going to drive me nuts, These are common thoughts. I'm not saying they're what you're having. But there is the awareness always. There's always an object that the awareness is aware of. And so it's kind of, to me, how tangled do I get in the object? How much do I narrow down my focus? And then add on possibly emotional turmoil to it. And then those are just making layers on layers on layers. So it's just something to kind of notice. And it's sort of as Bill said, starting out this evening, a slight effort, not just to flow, but some effort to open out of that, narrowing. So I just find that a helpful process to notice that when I'm more open with my awareness, and there's a set of questions that come with this, like one I've used for sound that Lama Eric gave that was quite helpful, is that sound, where is that sound occurring? And you don't sit there like contemplating for 5 minutes, but just the question can open. Where's that sound occurring? You can just quickly go out there, in here, somewhere in between. Then just let go. So that puts us back into the awareness ball field, that kind of question.
The more we settle into these things and allow our attention to become more refined, even that sense that there is an object and awareness.
Yeah, the duality.
Where is the object? Where does the object meet the awareness?
Yeah, that's great.
That's a good one. But you have to be kind of relaxed and settled for this to really for it to work. Otherwise, it just becomes kind of like another annoying question, just like your teacher kind of harassing you with, and another thing, try this, figure this out, do this, try that, do that.
And just skating off into a ton of conceptualization, which is more frustration.
Right.
That made me think of a question I was going to ask in addition to what we were just talking about of when you're looking at it, when a thought arises and you rest with it or bring your awareness to it, that my experience is also that it disintegrates. But there's a certain amount of energy or something that comes as like a blowback from that dissipation that I'm kind of curious about. And sometimes in sessions when I am settling deeper, it does become very abstract, as you were saying, Bill. This abstract sense of that there doesn't seem to be a difference between my mind stream and the experience of the objects. But there's this sense of energy that goes along with it that is almost like very highly anticipatory, almost like running your finger along a razor, but like not so much that you would cut yourself off. It's just a very strange kind of palpable feeling. It's kind of pleasurable, but I just have never really known what to make of that, and just wondering what that is or what to do with it. Just rest in it as I would any other experience. I don't know, any insight would be helpful.
So I may have to have you repeat that all, because I've tried to follow all the little pieces of it in the way you're using certain terms. And so one of the challenges when we're actually talking about directly about our experience is that, you know, like, how did you use the word abstract, and how did you use fragmentation? I think I get some of it based on my experience of trying this out over time. I think at the beginning it's a little bit shocking to sort of thoughts are, seems like they're something other than what I thought they were, without actually really thinking about what they were. But there's just a changed relationship, and there is kind of it's much more dynamic, and there's some kind of energy there. But the main thing in that is relaxing with it. Relaxing with it. But go ahead, try and sort of see where your question really is in that. So maybe I can
I guess
tune in a bit more.
I guess that's helpful, just because there's that sense of anticipation that I mentioned, as in maybe not quite being able to comfortably sit with it yet, because it's still a novel sensation. As you mentioned, like a different relationship with your thoughts when you pay attention to a greater degree. So that's helpful. And I think maybe that's just more of practicing and acclimating to it and treating it just as another experience.
So what's the anticipation?
It's almost like you're waiting for the thought to occur, because there is this sense of like you didn't pursue the stillness, but because you sat with the experience long enough, it kind of comes as a byproduct. Do you know what I mean?
The stillness.
The stillness comes as a byproduct, not that you were seeking it, but then you're resting in that stillness, and then the anticipation is almost like you're waiting for the next thought to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
there is something that sometimes I think of it as kind of like a forward lean. It's kind of like you're not actually standing still, you're standing leaning with one foot. And so it's kind of like you have to take the next step. You're leaning into something, and there's something. I think that's part of the dynamic energy of confusion is always this kind of launching towards resolution of some kind. The basic confusion has a disquieting energy that wants something else. That's kind of like, that's the most fundamental kernel of the experience of confusion, is the wish for something else at a very, very subtle level. And so just, it really does require kind of almost like turning back into awareness. To actually meet the experience, as opposed to have that.
Yeah, and I think off of that, when I look at it a little bit closer, it's almost like the anticipation is almost like, am I going to have the next thought or not? But also, is there going to be something else besides a thought, like some sort of breakthrough? You know, like that, and that's kind of like the leaning into it, as in like, perhaps there could be a breakthrough. You know, so that's on the side of anticipation too.
And the breakthrough in that sense or the not thought or the anything, that's something that's going to happen. Which leads you to, it's the look, it's like, I think I'm looking in the right direction to see what's going to happen, and whatever it is, it's going to happen. But it's like being in orbit. You're constantly falling into the field of gravity, but there's just this enough energy in the orbit to just keep cycling. So you never land. But that really requires looking back at the experience that's arising right at the moment. So that turning back into the experience, dropping that sense of anticipation that the experience will be better, that there's anything to improve on. But it's a pretty subtle moment.
Yeah.
So that
Thank you.
requires a lot of relaxation and relaxing, dedicating the merit when it seems like something happens and letting go of it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I was just going to say relax more, and then relax more, and then relax more. That's what I say to myself, because I get in that same thing, and it's just spinning the wheel, you know. It's almost like you've settled down and the wheel of confusion's almost stopped, and then it's like, spin it. Yeah. So it really helps me in that moment to go more into my body in a way, more awareness in the whole scan, and really relax the body. You know, keep a very firm seat, but really relax the body, because I'll start feeling in that minute where I'm in that forward leaning, I'm literally kind of tightening. So, yeah.
Yeah, there is a kind of a subtle, the energetic body. There is a interface in the subtle energetic body, which is not really distinct from the physical body in a certain respect. But just allowing that to kind of the knots of tension in that unravel. Physical relaxation is helpful. I saw somebody reaching towards the microphone. Matthew.
Due to recent lifestyle changes, I've not just decreased substance use. I've been discovering a very physical resurgence of anxiety. I have a lot of issues with anxiety. I've had them for as long as I can remember, and in this evening sit, I was able to. I felt more. What would you call that? Mentally relaxed and at ease, at least to the point where I didn't feel constantly distracted by thoughts or sensations, but by thoughts, not by sensations. And I kind of discovered there was a kind of a tension right in my center, which is like what happens a lot with with anxiety. There's sort of a residual tightness in the diaphragm, and even when I'm minding my breath, there's a sort of a certain plateau where I'm not struggling with the practice necessarily, but there is still tension physically, and which sort of kind of creates a passive block on my ability to sort of what you're talking about, sort of relax a bit more relaxing. I kind of feel like I kind of sort of hit a point where even though I know I have the potential to relax more, my body is holding this tension that simple breath work doesn't alleviate. And I'm not really looking for some kind of grand answer. I'm just kind of curious about how I can work with tension that doesn't subside through the practice. That doesn't subside readily. Because usually I'm able to practice if I have enough time to practice long enough and sort of be disorganized enough in my practice, I can let all that go. But with calm abiding, I very much like to focus on the awareness. And I reach a certain level where if I want to relax more, I have to let go of my posture. I have to let go of the sort of the upright posture. I kind of want to be kind of cave in. Sort of at a certain point, physical relaxation becomes impossible unless I let go of posture, basically.
I've found over time that that's not true. That I don't know what it is, but this morning I just sat here for about 3 hours and I didn't particularly feel like I had to get up and stretch or move. So I'll at least hold my own experience out as something that occurs in the realm of possibilities. So I'm saying, like, I don't think it's an absolute truth that you have to let go of posture in order to relax. I think there's something that the more that we cultivate posture throughout our life, not just while we're sitting on the cushion, the more it becomes kind of like the relaxed center. It's kind of a relaxed, it's kind of, our yoga teacher once said, the more you get into it, the more you find that downward facing dog is actually just kind of a relaxed posture. And you think, how could that possibly be? It's like, my arms are going on like this, like, oh, my, but
yeah,
I get it. I mean, sort of having this experience with just sitting, that it can actually unfold. I think there's one thing, there are a couple of things that I would say. One is that, and Michael mentioned something that Kala Rinpoche had said, that patience, a really vast sense of patience with practice is really important, because and then the other piece is that the wish, the hope that either the anxiety will subside and then we'll be able to practice, or the practice will get so good that it will make the anxiety go away. That whole dynamic kind of can get a little, it's dicey, it's all in the realm of kind of like, I remember when, I don't know if they still do this in school, but when we'd have votes in class and you're supposed to put your head down and not look.
Oh, yeah.
Like that, but kind of going, you're peeking to see what everybody else is doing. So, in the same way, we're kind of peeking to see whether or not we can make our experience be something other than what it is. And that comes out of that fundamental stance of leaning towards something else is somewhere else, some other time in the future, somewhere, that's where things will be better. And so I will, things won't,
Yeah, I've been noticing that too.
no, it's Ryan trying to help me. So I think he probably ought to turn down the microphone and tell me to sit up closer.
I have a question, Matthew. Have you tried meditating lying down?
Actually, that's mostly where I sort of started with breath work, was just kind of reclined position.
But so, the traditional kind of corpse pose kind of posture for meditation is one of the 4 postures that the Buddha taught for meditation, not just, breath work. And, for some people that's difficult because they're liable to fall asleep.
Right.
But that may not be, I don't know if that's true with you. I mean, different people are different. And I think that, that could be a way that you could really relax without being in a poor posture. It's a good, open posture. And for people who have a hard time relaxing, it can be very helpful. So I think that trying that, and it's a legitimate posture. It's not like sort of second best or something. It's actually a very reasonable thing to try. And then just another practical thing. Do you get enough exercise?
I mean, I do exercise. I walk on a fairly regular basis. I usually get at least a few miles in a week.
Because I think there's some people who it just can be very beneficial to their whole metabolism for sleeping well, for being able to meditate, for being able to relax, to have some periods of intense exercise. And, so I recommend
thank you.
considering those two things.
Relatively intense exercise, and also exercise that actually engages more of our body than
just walking places.
Than just walking. That's great. That's what we do mainly, is just walking. But something that really allows you to use everything is, I think that those are very helpful things. I was running through, kind of starting before go to the more practical things, immediate things, just to point out that piece of that it actually takes time, and that kind of looking too closely to see whether or not we're still anxious, or whether or not something is that will always get in the way. And that will get in the way of the fundamental thing of being actually able to turn and look into the experience, because we'll have made the a priori decision that that experience of anxiety must be gotten rid of before any insight can arise. And that's flatly not true. It may be at a practical level an obstacle, and that's where we need to be very skillful in terms of how do we deal with our body, how do we deal with our lifestyle. Those kinds of things are very important in order to create the container that gives us a greater range of possibility of what we can do. So, but part of it is also just that it's really important to have that sense of the long view and the patience, and then we can actually we can relax about the anxiety a little bit. It's kind of, oh yeah, it's there, as opposed to, my God, it's there, which is that one just through the roof.
Just on that point, the Dalai Lama says, practice whatever for 6 months. Just do it. Just do it. No judgment, no grades, no good, bad. Just check in about every 6 months and see where things are. So we really have a hard time relaxing into that. I mean, we talk here a lot, and I see it in myself, and I see it in everyone. It's like a constant report card, good session, bad session, medium session and kind of grading every session, but that's just going to undermine our enthusiasm or our appetite for the practice. So just doing it. If you, Matthew, look at a year ago, yeah, and I saw your smile, that's the report card. Then we can feel encouraged, like, wow, how I am doing now, So, and that wasn't because you kept trying for, the good report card. You just showed up and did it. So it's just practice. And the thing I keep saying, because I need it myself, we don't rejoice enough in the achievements. I just think we're always like, what's the constant, what I call department of improvement? I try and shut down my department of improvement, But it's how the consumer world works. So we're steeped in that, like there's going to be something better, something better, something better. And then we do that to our Dharma, another new product every day. So if we can see that and just not do it, it's helpful.
Our quality control process only looks for failure.
Yeah, and improvement, like serious, like judgmental improvement.
I have a comment on relaxing, and tell me if you think I'm off course on this, but I've come to appreciate that there's a big difference between relaxing and being calm. That we use them synonymously, but they're not the same thing. So, for example, calmness might be a byproduct of relaxing, but it's not necessarily the aim. So a couple of weeks ago, I went through a medical thing. It was really, really painful. And, you tense up and it's like, okay, I'm going to relax, not with the expectation that I'm actually going to feel better, but I'm going to physically relax and just feel this pain going through me. I'm just going to feel it and not fight it. Did it make me feel better? Not really, but I think it kept me from mentally fighting with this thing that I couldn't control anyway. Or, recent presentation I gave, the AV just completely went upside down 10 minutes before my presentation and I almost had a nervous breakdown. And again, here it is, and I relaxed. Didn't necessarily make me feel better, but it kept me in check with what was going through. And some things you can't fight. I'm not sure if that's beneficial at all, but I think that we're always, kind of to your point, trying to change the thermostat and make ourselves feel just right. And sometimes you just can't. And relaxing isn't about feeling better. Sometimes it's about just feeling the energy that's going through you. And sometimes it's crap energy, but it's the energy you've got.
Yeah, not only can you, we're constantly, at a very subtle level, we're constantly turning the thermostat away from wherever we are. It's constant at a very subtle level. At a coarse level, sometimes we go, yeah, not too bad. But we're kind of subtly going,
I've never been more fidgety than when I am when I'm meditating.
Maybe when you slow down, you notice. But I want to come back to Stephen's point, and it's all about the word Bill already said, patience. And that's a certain type of patience called forbearance, the ability to bear difficult circumstances in somewhat of a calm manner. Like you were calmer after you told yourself relax than you would have been, probably. So they are connected, but they are kind of different. But, all of these things we're talking about, we can wrap the 6 paramitas around them. Our practice is a form of generosity. My practice feels more open. Like this evening, I had to just kind of say, go for someone else. Like, I don't feel like going back after 9 to 4, but I'll go because my brother's in, rehab right now with a broken hip. Okay, I can do it. All of a sudden, it just opens a little more, Then I can think everybody with a broken hip. So there's the generosity one. Ethics keeps our lives calm, so when we sit down, we're not going through trauma dramas, and then patience gives us the patience to sit through difficult times, the back hurts, the anxiety. So those are just the first 3 of the 6 perfections. But so it's just quite helpful to remember those also, learn about them, read about them, cultivate them. Then they come straight into the practice without having to think a lot about it.
Do you have any fresh observations as fresh people and questions?
We have to use the microphone for our streaming, so you just push the button and speak close to it, so that
Ooh,
streaming.
hello there.
You want it to be loud, so the streaming can pick it up.
I've been mostly sitting for 20 minutes at home, and so going longer, I find myself sinking into it better, which is really enjoyable, but my eyes get really, really distracting. All kinds of like the after images of just like staring at something for too long. And it gets really distracting. And I'll just try to go back to just feeling my breath and being and noticing the space around me. But I keep on noticing, like, it'll just kind of pop up, just like, oh, look at that, oh, wow. So I see the outlines of everything way too sharply, and it's just like, okay. Yeah. And it's really nice to be here with all of it. This is really, really nice. I really enjoy this.
So how long have you been meditating?
Off and on for years. Yeah, more seriously the past like 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm. And this relationship with the visual field, this is something that you mainly noticed because of sitting longer tonight, or is it something that you notice in general?
I tend to notice it in general, but it does always show up most vividly with experiences of prolonged sitting. Mm-hmm. And everything gets really sparkly and it gets kind of distracting.
Yeah. Yeah. That happens. It's that's one of the things that just sitting still there's a lot of our body has a lot of habit to do something, to scratch the left ear on, like that. It's on schedule to scratch the left ear every X minutes, or do this, or whatever. We have all these little scheduled things, and our visual field has all kinds of things that it's sort of kind of tongue-in-cheek scheduled to do. I think I'll look for some outlines. I'll look at this for similarities between this object and another object. I'll look for differences. Compare and contrast. I know, let's do compare and contrast now. So there are all kinds of little shticks that go on with all kinds of aspects of our experience. And just sitting with them it evens out over time. It evens out over time a little bit. Do you have any observations?
Yeah, just a couple, because I have the same thing. There's this thing called soften the gaze, soften it. So this is not soft. Safu, sabuton, floor, very clear, stare, 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 look away now because I've stared at red, I see kind of green, But soften the gaze, it's like soft. You can do it. And just play with that. But also trying different things with the eyes closed more. Picking one very uninteresting thing and just staying on that, like that one little dot there, and then soften. So I can barely see it, but I don't move my eyes around. And I don't try anything. I'm not trying anything. I'm not trying to see, I'm not trying to not see. It just takes it away from there. So if that might help, just relax with it.
Yeah. I have noticed that I do have there's a bit of aversion there, of wanting it to go away, so I can just be all nice and centered and focused and just do the thing right, and instead of just being really, really distracted.
That seems like the theme tonight for people is either grabbing certain things in our meditation or wanting them out of the meditation. And I love this saying, I think it was Bokar Rinpoche in one of his spiritual songs, I neither accept nor reject this. That's so interesting because it puts me in such a strange state of mind. I neither accept nor reject this. Wow, okay. And so I think that could be with our sight, with our anxiety thing, with our leaning forward. I don't reject or accept this. So it somehow is trying to cut both of those afflictions. Yeah, which are based on a certain kind of ignorance. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I agree with that. Softening the gaze advice, and some of the instructions for where to put the gaze are actually in space, not very far in front of you. So if you were actually doing that, then the things that are, there's nothing there to actually put a focus on. And so in essence, that accomplishes the same thing. Things become soft because, if we're looking kind of close and at nothing, then all there is soft. And then another thing beyond going, rather than, you could closing the eyes, but then that has some disadvantages too, or can have. But there's also a trick of having the eyelids partly over what you're, kind of shading what you can see. And so the eyes aren't completely closed, but it kind of helps to remove some of the stimulus and just make the brain a little quieter.
I think Alan Wallace calls that a hooded gaze.
Hooded gaze, yeah.
There are quite a few things.
Sometimes helpful.
That aspect of practice of just essentially seeing the space that's here, as opposed to, we tend to think, it's just objects, but the space is there. So just that's the quality of not seeing an object in this space, just kind of leaving the attention there. Another thing that I've done sometimes is, particularly when going through all the domains of the senses, you think if you use hearing, then it's kind of like everything I hear, not this one thing that I pick out as the most important thing to listen to, and then I don't. You hear kind of the whole panorama of the audio domain. And in the same way, you can actually explore the visual domain and see this kind of it's a domain of experience. It sort of has a periphery, and it's possible just to kind of notice that as a whole, and not as like this kind of thing to to look into things within that. It's a domain of experience. So as we go through, say, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and go through each of the domains of experience, we can go through the entire tactile field, and we go through kind of the entire body and just see what the tactile field of experience is like. And sometimes resting, kind of going slowly, like go down here to here and here to here, and sometimes just resting with the overall. In the same way, we can become very familiar with all the domains of experience, and the visual field is one of those. And we can start to notice it's kind of our experience is a little bit slapstick. It's kind of a funny deal how we put all sorts of stuff together, and how we think we see everything clearly, but actually the area that we can actually, with visual acuity, really see clearly is very small. But then I think I see all this, but it's because I looked up there and I did all this, and now that's all just memory. Any of my sense of clarity about what that railing looks like is pure memory. It's not visual experience whatsoever. So just like our experience is our oyster. The world is our oyster when it comes to sort of developing more familiarity and insight into a kind of nature of experience. So, but just that thing of just recognize the whole raw field, as opposed to, ooh, this, or it has this quality or that quality. What's your names? Your name? You don't need the microphone for that.
Nicholas.
Nicholas and Anjali. Anjali? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Good to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you as well.
Bill, Zopa, Dora, and everybody else.
Hello, everybody else.
Is it that time, Giuseppe? It is.
Just exactly.
And just as we began our practice session and ended it with our wishes for profound well-being for all, and our discussion with the same sense of deep wish. And it's even useful to think of 1 or 2 things that came up in the course of the discussion that we could feel like, oh, that was interesting, that's inspiring. I should try something with that. I should take this out on the road. I should see what happens this week with that. And if you do that and then something interesting happens, maybe next week we'll have something even more interesting to talk about. It may benefit yourself and others along the way. So.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Ryan, if you're down here and you want to control the volume,
Right here.
Yeah, so that's off now.
Yeah, I noticed a little bit of not feedback with ringing. I was trying to EQ it.
Ah, okay. So I imagine you could do that here too.
Yep.
So,
So this is yours.
yeah, that's mine. But I'm trying to bring it because at the end of sessions when we have conversations, be able to just,
So the whole room doesn't have to hear your
yes,
consultation.
yes, yeah.
I was going to ask you if you have the contact information for the electrician or how we could reach out to him. The audio tech wanted to
Mm-hmm.
have a meeting of minds with him about
Uh-huh.
some of the stuff that's going on.
Okay. We need to go through John Jennings because the electrician's bill is just going like that. So, but the electrician will be around this week. Yeah, probably. He probably would do something a little on if he didn't have to like show how he was spending his time to his boss, he'd probably yeah. But if there were some very specific questions, kind of sort what those would be, and then we'll go from there. Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. Good to meet you. Yeah. And where else have you sat?
So now they're all streaming on just center in Asheville.
In Asheville, North Carolina. Ah. Yeah. Oh, all right. Who is the teacher in Nashville?
Didn't have a resident teacher.
Uh huh.